Okay, I think Agnes, are you the next speaker?
Right, you should be able to hear me now again. Jafar
Okay.
Shayan works at ABB E Mobility, focusing on EV charging infrastructure and contributing to the acceleration of the EV transition and zero emission plans. His presentation topic will be maximizing digital defense, applying the Pareto
Okay.
principle and theory of constraints in cybersecurity. Now, I've met Jafar many times before. I spoke with him at one of the IT security summits last year in the Netherlands. Lovely to see you again, Jafar. How are you?
Yeah, yeah. Likewise, it was great to see you, and it's great to see you again today. Do you hear me and do you see the
Yes, we can
presentation?
hear you. We can hear you.
Awesome. So, can I start?
Yeah, maximizing digital defense. We can see it. Applying the Pareto, is it Pareto principle?
Pareto principle, yes.
So tell us more.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to talk about maximizing digital defense. But first, let me introduce myself a bit, although that Elliot introduced me beautifully. I like to be known as continuous learner and continuous improver. And I have more than 20 years of experience in this field, and I work in different industries and different countries and various roles. And I have gained lots of experiences throughout my career, and also beside that, in my academic studies and experiences, I gained some first-hand experiences in different industries. Mostly in when I was doing my master thesis, which was about risk management framework for cloud computing environment. I was working with some CEOs, CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, in mostly in banks, insurances, and manufacturing. And then I learned the challenges that they were facing in securing their businesses and running that safely. And of course, I did my PhD in computer science, specialized in the machine learning and deep learning. But let's set the stage first. So we are talking about the digital defense, but what is the landscape that we are talking about? This we know that we are living in a digital world that we haven't seen it before. Everything right now we are relying on that, and it has brought us lots of advantages like smart homes, smart devices, intelligent vehicles, which now they are the computers with big S engine attached to that. And we have smart cities, Industry 4.0, and we are going toward the Society 5.0, and we're going to have digital twins, and we're going to produce and rely more and more on digitalization. And I think you agree that we can't assume or we can't imagine the world differently. And we see that it brings us lots of comfort, and we are very happy with that. But it didn't come without any cost. It has some challenges associated to that. But the most important one is the digital defense or the cyber resilience that has become more and more concerning for all of us as individuals and as businesses. And cyber resilience or digital defense has found its way to the top of the priority of the leaders around the world. It's not a nice to have or negotiable priority. It is the most priority for everyone. It has become an existential threat to all the businesses. And I think all the speakers talked about that. Some of the speakers shared some data that was showing the importance of these the threats that we are dealing with, and they are growing. So, for example, if you have read that in the news in last few weeks, you heard about the XCUtils backdoor, you heard about the Operation Triangulation, which they showed the sophistication, the unprecedented sophisticated levels of the attacks. And it shows that the cybercrime and the cartels behind the cyber crimes, They are well funded. They are highly motivated, and the stake is very high for the businesses to make their businesses safe and secure and survive from this. It shows that we are in a war. The data that we have shows that, you know, if we consider the cybercrime as a country, as a state, there are some estimations of the cost, the damages caused due to these cyber threats to the businesses and to the society. For example, one of the estimations for 2026 is that it will cost us about $20 trillion around the world. Yes, $20 trillion, capital T, which if you consider it with the other economics, it will land in the third position of the economics after the US and China. And it's growing super fast. The slope is really high and exponentially it's growing. That's why lots of leaders, they say security first, security always. And that's something that we need to focus on. So we are in war. We need to have the wartime leaders. We need to have war approaches to this to be able to survive and thrive through this era. So for that, I'm going to explain the framework that I'm proposing here, which is very simple, but yet very powerful, and I have experienced the effectiveness of it in business. The first component of this framework is the Pareto principle. So Pareto principle, in short, it says that it states that for many outcomes, there are roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes, which are known as vital few. Dr. Vilfredo Pareto, who is an Italian economist, showed about 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago, about 1906, he showed that about 80% of the land in the Kingdom of Italy at that time was owned by about 20% of the population. But this, and that's why it is also known as 80-20 rule. And this is very powerful. It helps us to simplify the things, and it helps us to focus on what truly matters for us, to ensure that to achieve the most out of the efforts that we are putting into place. And it is not only applying to the economics. It found its way to the other fields such as quality assurance and so on. The second component of this framework is theory of constraint. The theory of constraint was introduced by Dr. Eli Goldratt, and intuition of it is that any system is limited in achieving of its goals by very small number of the constraints or bottlenecks. In the manufacturing, mostly it is known as bottlenecks. So it is very similar to the common idiom that we know: a chain is no stronger than its weakest link. Dr. Eli Goldratt explained this theory of constraint beautifully with some examples in different areas in his seminal book, which is called The Goal, which I highly recommend. If you haven't read that yet, go and find it. It's a nice read. There is Jim Kim, by the way. He also has a quote, famous quote, in his book Phoenix Project, that he says any improvements made anywhere besides the bottleneck are illusion. Which, although that I agree with Jim in almost everything, but I want to just go a little bit further and say that any improvement which is made anywhere besides the bottleneck is not only an illusion, it can be dangerous. And I can explain why. Because I call these improvements micro improvements, and these micro improvements are somehow waste of our rare resources. I haven't seen any leaders who doesn't complain about the limited or lack of enough resources and having huge pile of the demands that they have. And so they can't find the balance and they need to prioritize constantly. So if you don't place your scarce resources into the right place that it can help you to achieve the most out of it, then you are misusing or wasting your resources, which is dangerous for you. And another thing is, these micro improvements are giving you false sense of improvements. It gives, and it can mislead you because you are putting them on the simple things that that you can achieve them, and then checklist, check some things, but then you are not improving the system as you must. So when you combine these two components, that they are powerful, as I explained, they are not only complement each other. You can born a superpower tool that helps you to fight against the adversaries here. And the reason is that you can imagine that if you apply the Pareto principles in the strategic level to find the focus that you need to have, few vitals that you can focus on them to achieve the most out of your efforts, and then communicate that vision and to your organization, and then support the organization in the tactical and operational level with the theory of constraint to make sure that they are executing the security measures smoothly and effectively. Then you can ensure that you can achieve your digital defense the best. So let's tap into some data to just support the discussions that we had so far. I look into the Microsoft Digital Defense Report 2022. Microsoft is and digesting and analyzing trillions of the signals annually around the globe. They are working with thousands of the partners. They are working with millions of the customers. They are managing millions of devices, and they are tackling billions of the attacks around the world. And they combined and analyzed all this data, and they report it annually in the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, which is helpful, and it's kind of serving as a state of digital defense. So there are lots of insights from this report that some of them are concerning that we know. For example, we know that the number of the state-sponsored attacks are increasing significantly. The sophistications of the attacks are increasing. Some other speakers also mentioned that the adversaries are using AI to supplement their efforts, and they are improving that. They are working as entrepreneurial efforts, and they are working together collaboratively. So it is the stake is very high. Also, it's very clear. But something that I like to highlight here is this picture. The finding of this finding of Microsoft is very interesting for me. They found that if we implement the basic security hygienes, we can protect ourselves against 98% of the attacks. And these basic security hygienes are, I think, common sense. We know that, and we don't need to discuss and argue about them. Enabling the multi-factor authentication, it's something that it helps us, and if you combine it with the conditional access, it helps you to prevent lots of the attacks. And Microsoft itself, they are going to enforce MFA for using the Azure Resource Administrations from this July, gradually onward. And the other thing is applying the zero trust principles, and it is also kind of gist of the security principles that we need to apply. It basically it limits the impact of the any attack on the organization. in a term, we can say that we are trying to decrease the blast radius, because we know that there is no absolute security possible. So we need to implement the defense in depth, and with applying the zero trust, we are doing that. So it is we are always assuming the breach happens. We are always explicitly authenticate the users. We are and we are trying to limit the zones of applying the least privilege access. This helps to simplify all types of the security measures, from the preventive, detective, and responsive measures, and helps to make them effective. The other one is using the modern anti-malware and extended detection and response tools, XDRs, to help to prevent us and to increase the security posture, especially in the endpoints. Then keeping the systems and the workload up to date, which is very clear that we need to do that. And it is interesting that lots of the attacks were caused by having the unpatched, outdated systems, and it was the entrance point for the attackers to attack the organizations. So we need to make sure that we keep the frameworks, the OS applications, everything up to date, and having the latest patch there to have us more secure. And then protecting the data, I don't need to go through the details. One of the speakers, Lakshmi, I guess, she talked about the protecting of the data in details. And of course, it's about knowing the data that we are dealing with, classifying the data, and then applying the proper mechanism to protect those data. And for example, this classification you saw in the presentation of the Lauren, that he put the public in on the footer of his slide, that's showing that this data is public and can be shared with everyone. And so it can be internal, restricted, and so on. And we need to have different mechanisms to control that. Another thing that I want to share here is that, interestingly, in the report of 2023, this number 90%, 98% changed, and Microsoft reported that by applying these measures, we can protect ourselves against 99.2% of the attacks. So less than 1% of the attacks are outliers, which we need to implement some other measures to protect ourselves. But that's huge, and it perfectly aligns with the Pareto principles that I explained there. So let's look into practicality of this mechanism. The first thing is that we discussed that the security is very context sensitive, and it is, and we know that it, and as one of the well-known principles, that security is equal to risk management. I think we have discussed that earlier with some speakers talked about that. And in the risk management framework, we know that the first, based on the ISO framework, that it starts with establishing the context, and then risk assessment, and then risk treatment. And based on my experience, most of these organizations that they fail to implement the risk management framework effectively, they missed the proper establishing the context, because if you don't do that, you don't define the scope, you don't have the common understanding of your risk appetite, and then risk assessment criteria, then everything else will not go right. So, and here also, it's very important to know that there is no one size fit all, and we need to make sure that we we find the key risk for each organization based on their needs, based on their landscape and the security posture that they have, and of course the vulnerabilities that they are dealing with. Here, this Pareto principle helps us to implement something like which Dr. Charles Weir called it a ruthless approach, which I think it is the normal approach. This is the way that we need to do. We have the the categories that are measured, and then we can point them the accumulative contribution of those measures towards the together, and then we see that those that they contribute more than 80%, we focus on them, and it helps the organization to find what truly matters and avoid the chaos and overwhelming list of the priorities that Floyd showed in that meme beautifully. The security operations team, the people are overwhelmed, and then we need to make sure that we don't add extra pressure on them. We need to make sure that we are finding those that are truly matters to us. So, and I have seen some people when I ask them that, what are your priorities? What are the measures that you are looking into? What are the risks that you are looking into the most? And then they said everything. So there is a saying says that if everything is important, then nothing is. And we know that lots of people, lots of leaders, they say something similar, that a strategy is figuring out what not to do, like Steve Jobs, for example. But this part is helping us to finding out the key measures or the key areas that we're going to focus. For example, it can be the MFA, implementing MFA, or applying the zero trust. Then we're going to communicate to the organization and make it clear and elaborate that okay, that's going to be our focus, and it's the most important thing that we're going to do that. So imagine in the war that we have the digital defense generals in the war room, that they have a clear overview of the landscape that they're going to protect. And then they found out that the weakness of their landscape is these two areas. And then they communicate to the organization that, okay, that's the part that we're going to defend the most and put our resources there. Then they don't leave them alone. They need to support. You need to support the organization to implement and execute that. And then that's where this theory of constraint comes to the picture. And this this is very simple. As we have seen that it says that we need to find the bottlenecks or the constraint. There are some one or multiple constraints that they are limiting the outcome of the system. So finding that is very important, and then focusing on exploiting that constraint or elevating that, it helps to generate the most out of the system. So the first step is identifying. We can identify that, for example, you're going to implement the MFA for all the systems. You're going to apply the zero trust principles, but then you find that the team who is responsible for identity and management and access management, and they are the bottleneck of the system because they don't have enough resources. So the first thing is that they exploit the constraint. That means that you are trying to help them as the most to so that they can achieve and they can do the most out of their available resources. But if it doesn't help them, then we need to go and subordinate everything else to compare to this constraint. So you might need to change the processes to make sure that everyone knows that, okay, this is the team that you shouldn't interrupt them, and make sure that they are doing the best. So if they are doing some other work related to the other things in the organization, you offload it to other teams to make sure that they have the capacity and bandwidth to focus on what is the bottleneck and the constraint of the system. But what if it doesn't help and still it's a bottleneck? Then we need to just elevate the constraint. And this in this stage, mostly it is involving of some capital investment, for example, increasing the number of team members, or you need to invest in procuring some other systems or engaging external partners, so that these bottlenecks moves to another part of the system, and then you keep repeating this to find the new bottleneck, which reduces the performance of the team, and then go on.
Now, Jafar, we're going to share this slide to everybody afterwards as well. This is a very important slide because one of the questions that's come up, Jafar, is in what ways can the theory of constraints be used to improve an organization's cybersecurity posture and resource allocation? And resource allocation is very, very important because that could be very costly, not just about the technology, not just about the proactiveness, but also the reactiveness, the speed. We talked about credibility and reliability, and that's something that we're going to be going on to in a minute. So Jafar, if you could please just finish off your presentation now, because we're just going a little bit over time, and then we're going to move on to Agnes, who I'm sure is waiting to take her step. But Jafar, please continue and
yeah, just I will finish in 2 minutes, and then I will share the slides later on. So I'm going to just share with you 2 of the pitfalls that I have seen that they might endanger the success of your efforts. The first one is that system thinking. So as Aristotle says, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I have seen that some leaders, they go through the reductionist think, and then imagine that the general, instead of looking into the landscape, focuses on one area and then misses the holistic view. That's going to be very dangerous. Dr. Russell Ackoff, one of the pioneers of the system thinking, says that the system is more than the sum of its parts, and it's product of the interaction, their interactions, the way these parts fit together. And it's very important to don't miss that dynamics. The other pitfall is the survival bias. There are lots of biases that might impact the effectiveness of our decisions, but I have seen that in data-driven decisions that we're dealing with in cybersecurity mostly, this cyber bias, which is also related to somehow to the system thinking, it's about logical error that we are excluding some data because it's not available, or they don't fit on some kind of criteria that we have decided, and then we analyze based on the data that survived from that selection, and that can mislead us. So with that, I'd like to just say it again that we are in war, and then we need to make sure that we are doing the most out of our efforts to be able to have a chance to survive and thrive. And with that, thank you very much. And if there's any question, I will be happy to answer.
Well, you've answered already one of the most pertinent ones that's been raised, which is the theory of constraints and how can it improve the organization's cybersecurity posture, because of the resource allocation is a very, very big question on people's lips. The other thing was answered by yourself, the essential components of an effective data-driven reporting system, because we need to, as you said, create the kind of the boxes in which we're assessing, of course, always. Jafar, thank you. Always very, very insightful. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Cool. Agnes, through.